Everybody, my name is Grant, and I'm on a mission to watch every movie ever made. And if that is something that you are interested in, well, then you are in the right place, and your wish has been granted. My mission to watch every movie ever, I watched 7 movies this week, and I'm just going to rank them from worst to best. What were the greatest movies that I saw this week, and which ones were absolutely abysmal? So let's get right into it. What was the worst movie I saw this week? That's going to be Peter Farrelly's new Prime Video original movie, Balls Up, starring Mark Wahlberg and Paul Walter Hauser. If you've seen any of the marketing for this movie, if you've seen the trailer, if you've heard the premise, whatever you've done to hear about what Balls Up is, it does not do the movie justice just to how stupid it is. This is a movie about two condom salesmen who go to Brazil to watch the World Cup. They run onto the field chasing after a mascot and stop a goal from going in for Brazil, causing them to lose the World Cup to Argentina. After that, Mark Wahlberg and Paul Walter Hauser are forced to run away from the entire Brazilian public who is after their heads trying to kill them because they made them lose the World Cup. What we get is an absolutely incredibly stupid buddy comedy chase movie through Brazil, watching them go through all of these incredibly dumb situations where they're around these wacky characters and they're forced to do these dumb things. All of the humor is so juvenile. It feels like it was a movie that was written by a 10-year-old, and it feels like it was a movie that was directed by a 9-year-old. However, this is an Oscar winning director. Peter Farrelly made Green Book, which, depending on your opinion of the Oscar Best Picture movies that have been out in the last 20, 30 years, a lot of people think Green Book is the worst one to have won the Best Picture in quite a while. It's up there along with some movies that came out a long time ago that people just don't think have had that staying power to be the best picture. Up there with The Hurt Locker, up there with Crash. Everybody's talking about Green Book as this awful experience that really just simplifies race relations in America at a time where it needs to be taken seriously. This movie doesn't even try to do that. This is a dumb, silly movie and really just does the bare minimum it needs to even make its money back on Prime Video. You hear a Prime original movie and you kind of know it's not going to be very good to begin with. You tell me it's directed by the guy who made Dumb and Dumber. I really didn't want to watch this movie at all, but I had a day off and I gave it a chance. It did exactly what you expect it's going to do. And if that's really all you're looking for, you may get something out of this movie. It really wasn't as horrendous as I was expecting. I have it at a 5 out of 10. So there are people who are going to see that score and think, yeah, I could go for a 5 out of 10 comedy starring Mark Wahlberg and Paul Walter Hauser, two actors who are known for their ability to act. I mean, Mark Wahlberg is incredibly well renowned. He's been around in Hollywood for a very long time. Paul Walter Hauser is a new actor making a strong entry into the industry. He has a lot of potential to do something a lot better than this. So for him to spend the beginning of his career in a movie like Balls Up, it's really disappointing to see. I wouldn't recommend this movie to anybody, but you can find it on Prime Video if that's what you're looking for. In sixth place, right after Peter Farrelly's Balls Up, I unfortunately have a movie that should not be talked about anywhere near the previous one. And that is the 1931 movie Dracula. This is the iconic Dracula movie that everybody knows and everybody talks about. It stars Bela Lugosi as Dracula and Dwight Frye as Renfield. And while I only have this movie at a 6 out of 10, I do want to highlight the parts of the movie that I really enjoyed. Number one being Dwight Frye as Renfield. The man is iconic on screen as this crazed minion of Dracula. His scenes are equally terrifying and amusing with the way he's just able to command his screen presence. This is a movie that doesn't have a lot going on with its audio. It doesn't have a lot of music. There's no score because at the time people felt that audiences weren't really going to be able to receive movies with scores that aren't diegetic. They don't come from anywhere in the scene, like an orchestra. A lot of people weren't going to be ready for that. So the movie is surprisingly quiet for a lot of its runtime. And while I think that takes away from a lot of the ambiance of the movie, it does allow Dwight Fry the chance to kind of rule every scene he's in and just take it over and honestly steal the performance from Bela Lugosi, who does a great job here as he does in everything he's ever been in. I mean, the man is imposing and just truly one of those actors that you remember the way they looked and the way that they commanded the screen. You remember Bela Lugosi, but Dwight Fry is the standout of this movie. And so, just for his performance alone, there is something historically to get out of the 1931 Dracula. But honestly, unlike the Frankenstein coming out by Universal right around that time, I want to say it was 1931 as well. Dracula just didn't really have that staying power for me. The movie is incredibly slow. It moves at almost a glacial pace through these different scenes and different plot points and different little like chunks of the story that just don't really do anything to get you hooked. You spend the movie kind of waiting for the next big thing to happen, and then the next big thing happens, and the movie's over, right? It's a short movie, but it's also not really one that even justifies the runtime it has. This feels like a 45-minute experimental movie that you would have gotten out of somebody in the 1910s, maybe even the 1920s. For 1930, we know that Hollywood can do a little bit more than this. And so while I do respect the historical aspect of Dracula, and I recognize that this movie is responsible for so many more iconic pieces to come later, it really just wasn't for me. It's one of those movies that I always talk about when you get up in a certain age away from us, 100 years ago, 95 years ago, it can really only mean so much in the current state of cinema. I respect it, but it wasn't really something that I enjoyed. So that's why it's at number 6 on my list. And coming in at number 5 on my list, ironically, only a single point higher, in my personal opinion, than the 1931 Dracula, is going to be the 1972 Blackula. This was a movie that I considered to just slightly beat out its original counterpart just by being slightly more creative as a result of its premise. I mean, this is not a movie that really does anything crazy. You have a Dracula counterpart that was this African prince who is turned by Count Dracula and forced into a coffin for, I want to say, like 200 years, and then he's released in Los Angeles and he just starts terrorizing the local Los Angeles people. He finds a woman who reminds him of his wife who was taken from him when he was turned into a vampire. And so he's trying to form a relationship with this woman while he's also feeding on the people of Los Angeles and killing them and turning them into vampires. So you have a story of Dracula that is really just slightly more unique than the original. There's something different going on here that gives it a little bit more flavor. And that little bit of flavor does make up for the fact that I genuinely just found the original Dracula to be winding in what it wanted to say. Blackula was right there with it, but with just a hint more of something to grab onto. You have that spin of this is a story about uh, the black culture being stolen and them being forced into a different world than what they knew, being from Africa to Los Angeles to America. There's a little bit more there that I think just makes it a slightly more interesting movie. So I still have it at a 6 out of 10. Out of 100, I had Dracula at a 61 and Blackula at a 62. So it's just slightly more the movie that was for me. It's on Tubi and Prime Video right now, if that's something you're interested in. I would slightly recommend this one over the original. So if you're a big vampire fan, go ahead and check it out. Coming in fourth place is another 2026 April streaming original movie. That's going to be Roommates, which released on Netflix on April 17th. It's a Happy Madison Pictures production movie. It stars Sadie Sandler, who, from the last name, you can probably tell is Adam Sandler's daughter. So, a little bit of nepotism going on here. Sadie Sandler is immediately jumping into a leading role in a Netflix original movie. Also stars Chloe East, Nick Kroll, Natasha Lyon, a bunch of names that you might recognize and might have seen from other things in the past. But really, this is Sadie Sandler's show. Okay, she stars as a girl who is immediately off to college as a freshman. She chooses a roommate at orientation, played by Chloe East, and we find out pretty quickly that Chloe East is a god awful roommate. She is absolutely horrendous at her privacy, at not stealing things from Sadie Sandler, of taking advantage of her kindness, of her generosity. She is manipulative and an alcoholic. She talks a lot about how she's poor and she needs money from the people around her. And so Sadie Sandler's stuck in this really awkward position of having a roommate that she just doesn't like at all. And so this movie really tries to get you on its relatability. You know, there are probably a lot of you out there that have had a really bad roommate, that have had to live with somebody before that either didn't pick up after themselves or were constantly eating your food or not refilling the Brita or whatever it is that they were doing. You know that you might be able to recognize, hey, I've had a bad roommate like that too. But the movie takes it just a little too absurd and a little too far to the point where by the end of the movie, you really just don't like anybody. Sadie Sandler is no longer a likable character. She's become kind of a cartoon caricature of the character she was literally just like 45 minutes ago. She's completely ramped up into this entirely new person. And really, a lot of this movie relies on trying to make you laugh, but it only ever had me amused. I did find a lot of it to be kind of funny and kind of interesting, but it's not really the kind of thing that you laugh out loud and go, "Man, that was the funniest joke I've ever heard. I'm gonna remember this part of the movie, that part of the movie for a very long time." Roommates is kind of forgettable. It takes the easiest path for a lot of its jokes to land as possible to make them very broadly appealing to every type of person. Some of all its pieces is never quite as good as any individual one. There's some pieces in here that are interesting. I think some of the characters are interesting. I think the plot could be very engaging for people who felt this kind of way before, but Roommates never quite gets there. It never does quite enough to justify its existence. That said, Sadie Sandler does do a good job in here, and I really think that you can look at the whole nepotism of it and think, oh well, somebody else should have been in this movie. But does Sadie Sandler bring something unique to this? Does she add to this movie, and does she do a good enough job in the lead? I think if you ask yourself that question, yeah, she does. She is a good actress in this role in this movie that was largely written specifically for her. So I'm excited to see if when she gets a role that wasn't specifically made for her, is she able to bring it as well? Does she have the acting chops to be able to have a hopefully more consistent career than her father, than Adam Sandler? Hopefully, she can get to some of the highs that he's able to have gotten to in the past, but at the very least, maybe she'll stay away from some of the lows that he's gotten to, like Jack and Jill. So I have that one at number 4 out of 7 on my list. It is currently available on Netflix, dropped on Friday as well. At number 3 on my list, I have the horror movie The Yeti. This is a movie directed by Gene Guarano and William Pisciotta, and it is a retro horror movie about the 1920s. There's a group of adventurers that goes out to try and rescue an oil tycoon baron, right? The lead of this company looking for oil out in the middle of the Arctic wilderness, played by Corbin Burnson. You may know him as Henry Spencer from Psych. And so his son and a bunch of other adventurers, including the daughter of another one of the members on that expedition, they all go out into the Arctic wilderness to try and find the people that they love. And immediately, you find out that there's something out in this wilderness. If you've read the title and you've listened to anything I've said, you can probably guess what it is. But there's a Yeti out there and it's hunting them down. It's a movie that has a lot of smaller but still talented actors in there. It's got Brittany Allen, Eric Nelson, Corbin Burnson, like I mentioned. It's got Jim Cummings, who is probably the most recognizable name in there. You may have seen his movies. The Last Stop in Yuma County, That's one that I personally think he does an absolutely fantastic job. That's a 10 out of 10 movie for me. The Yeti is unfortunately not. I have it at a 7 out of 10, but if you look at the reviews for this movie, you see that it's only sitting at a 2 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I liked this movie significantly more than a lot of other people that saw it. I do think that its low budget and financial limitations do kind of prevent you from being able to enjoy this as much as you could have otherwise. You really don't see that much of the Yeti. It just kind of lingers in the background, hunting these characters off screen. But when this movie wants to show you a character getting killed by the Yeti, it does not back off. This movie is surprisingly gory and surprisingly violent. But really, where the Yeti shines the most is in its characters. At the beginning of the movie, you get this old-timey suit up sequence where you get to know all the characters that are on this trip, and you get an example of a soldier who was fighting Hitler and lost half of his face in the battle, so he wears a mask on half of his face that has a painted on a human eye and human skin color, and it really just makes him look unique. And Jim Cummings is not just some random character in this movie. His character is literally the guy who dropped the bombs on Hiroshima in World War II. That's an insane thing for a character in a Yeti horror movie to have done before the movie even started. That kind of backstory makes you interested in the rest of what this movie has to offer. And so, really, those characters are where it shines. Where it's lacking is pretty much all of the dialogue. The movie is not really written that well. And so, by the end of it, you're not really sure how to feel. You really didn't get as much of a connection to these interesting characters as I would have liked. And that does kind of prevent the movie from getting up to what I thought would have been an 8, maybe even a 9 out of 10. I have it at a 7 because while it presented a lot of really awesome things and I was able to enjoy those, just like the last movie, I will use the phrase, it wasn't worth the sum of all its parts. Those pieces together just didn't make as good of a movie as they could. But I did enjoy it. I do think it's a little underrated at a 2 out of 5, at a 4 out of 10. I think that this movie deserves to be seen. It's currently available to purchase on digital platforms. I'm sure at some point we'll see this make a drop on Tubi. At number 2 on my list, the second best movie I saw this week was Ballerina from the world of John Wick, starring Ana de Armas and also featuring Keanu Reeves. This is a movie that just absolutely, like the rest of the franchise, delivers carnage candy. The movie is awesome. There are so many explosions, there are so many gunfight sequences, there are so many knife fight sequences. Ana de Armas is able to pretty convincingly and pretty fulfillingly follow up what John Wick was able to do in his 4 movies. Ballerina takes all the best part of those John Wick movies and puts it as just an entire movie here. I mean, you are just constantly watching this girl kill hundreds of people for an entire 2-hour runtime. You just People come to kill her. She pulls a bunch of grenades out and blows everybody up. And there are buildings collapsing. There are body parts flying everywhere. She's jumping off of buildings. She's falling off of buildings. There are so many different sequences where you can just watch with your jaw dropped, thinking, this is awesome. But if you've seen the John Wick movies, you also know that a lot of what made those movies so good was the emotional core, that this was a man who had lost everything. He'd lost his wife to cancer. His wife had left him a dog so that he could remember what it meant to have a heart, and somebody took that from him. And as John Wick even quotes in this movie and in, I want to say, John Wick 3, when he goes and gets his tattoo burned off as a sign that he's punched his ticket, he says it wasn't just a puppy. That's not why this whole thing started. It was because it was the symbol of what his wife left him. That's what made the movie so emotional. It's really what made them work, was the heart behind it. We all recognize that what John Wick did was crazy and intense, but also slightly justifiable. Ballerina doesn't really have that. It has at its core, it seems like the story should work more. It's about Anna de Armas trying to avenge her father, who she watches die as a kid. But this story isn't really fleshed out in any meaningful way that makes you actually want to see some validation from that. Anna de Armas is great, and I'm rooting for her to kill all the bad guys because she's the hero of the movie. I didn't need a pretty ham-fisted explanation of why I should feel good about her doing all of this. They could have done it in a much better way, but I would rather have them not had it in there at all than tried to include this really half effort measure. This movie doesn't really have a story that propels you from scene to scene. So it feels like you're watching the movie and there's an awesome action sequence and everything is great. And then the period between that and the next action scene, I don't even remember some of the things that were going on. And I watched this movie 4 days ago. So while I do have this at an 8 out of 10 because really about 80% of this movie was awesome action sequences, the other 20% of story just didn't really work for me on any level, and ultimately left me feeling like this was a good movie, but a slightly forgettable one. If you like John Wick and you already haven't seen this movie, which a lot of you probably have, I do recommend you go out and see it. It's awesome, right? There's some true carnage in this movie. But if you really want the emotional core that John Wick had, you're not going to get it here. So just keep that in mind. The movie's currently available on HBO Max. Number one, Zootopia 2, the best movie that I saw this week. I watched it with my wife on Friday night. We made some dinner, we made a couple cocktails to go along with it. Zootopia 2 is just a fun time. Whether you're an adult, whether you're a kid, whether you're somewhere in between that, ages 1 to 99, they're probably going to have something to find out of this movie. There are a lot more references in Zootopia 2 than the first one that I was able to appreciate. You know, there's a Shining sequence in this movie. There's the same Godfather sequence from the last one, but they kind of spice it up a little bit. Zootopia 1 kind of felt like just a base level idea that they never really fleshed out past its initial, hey, what if animals were in a human city, right? Zootopia 2, it feels like they actually took that idea and thought about the details that would come as a result of that. You know, we have more of a story on the different segments of the city according to the different kinds of animals you are. And so that allows the creators of the movie to really have a lot more fun with their settings and their characters and their plot beats. I think Ke Huy Quan does a fantastic job as the snake in this movie that was in all of the trailers, all of the marketing. I think Jennifer Goodwin and Jason Bateman follow up the last movie just as well as they've ever been. They have a fantastic chemistry on screen. And there's a lot of supporting cast in this movie that does a fantastic job as well. Namely, Andy Samberg is in this movie. He plays one of the Linksleys, this rich family that has some secrets related to the birth of the city. I love seeing Jake Peralta in anything new. I've loved a lot of his movies where he's the star. Namely, Palm Springs is one of my favorite romance movies ever. So getting to see him in this was a great time. I really appreciated it. This really does feel like a movie that it's never a drag. It's a lot of fun. The plot is not without flaws. There are certainly points in this movie where I thought the story felt a little contrived just to pad out the runtime a little bit, and I don't think that was necessary. But if you're looking for a fun animated movie, Disney does a fantastic job coming back and saying, "Hey, this is what you're looking for out of us." And that's why Zootopia 2, while still at an 8 out of 10, was the best movie that I saw this week. This week wasn't a fantastic one for me. There's been a lot of weeks where I've had tons of 9s out of 10s, tons of 10s out of 10s. This one, we had a couple of 8s, a single 7, and then everything below it was a 6 or a 5. So really just not the best week for me. But I'm really excited to get into next week and see what movies can I check off the list on my mission to watch every movie ever made. What do you guys think I should watch? Okay. There are a lot of movies that I haven't gotten to see yet. And if I'm ever going to achieve my goal, I have to get to all of them. Tell me which ones you think I need to check off the list next. Let me know down in the comments, guys. Have a great day.